This is wonderful. We've been doing this with the police chief off and on for the last year, and it's just been a wonderful way to, let the community know what's going on. And so I really appreciate you participating, and I hope this is the first of many of our chats. I'd love to find out about your journey to Dorchester, and why you wanted to take this job on. This is a big deal. Tell us a little about, what that journey's been like and why you've come here.
That's a great question. So initially, I didn't start my career in education. I actually started my career as a social worker, or they call it a family support specialist in Newark, New Jersey. And I worked for DIFUS. So I started as a social worker in New Jersey, about 20 years ago. And I always liked helping people. I think that your purpose on earth, in my opinion, is to help people. And there's a fine line between help and enabling, but I think that we're solely here to help people be better. So I had people help me be better along the way. So I think that in return, you give that to people who need help as well. So I think public school, or at that time, social work, was what I wanted to do. And then working with these kids in the system, I noticed that a lot of them couldn't read and write. They were struggling academically. Not only were they in bad home environment situation, but they also struggled academically. I was one of those kids that come from poverty. I was one of those students that didn't have much of anything at a young age. I lived with my grandparents and things of that nature, but I still had a knack for wanting to be educated for some reason. I don't know why, but I still wanted to learn a lot in school. And I had the opportunity to get through education by playing basketball. So I kind of lucked out to establish that routine and discipline to be able to basically be internally motivated to go further. So I got tired of doing social work, and ultimately I had some friends that was working in Washington, D.C. in special education. I was like, hey, they said, you want to come down? I was just like, yeah, I'm tired of social work. Let's try education. And that was my foray into education in Washington, D.C. And then I worked for all special ed school in Washington, D.C. Then I worked for a charter school organization for 8 years called Imagine Schools in Washington, D.C. Worked for them for 8 years. That's how I began to really love education, really working with kids in poverty. I worked in urban education settings. So then after that, I went to Colorado Springs, Colorado, and worked as assistant principal in Sierra High School in Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
And at that time, Dr. Mitchell, who was the superintendent here before Mr. Brumwell, I worked with her in Colorado Springs. And she came here, and they had to open it up here as an assistant principal here at Maces Lane Middle School. So I ended up applying for the position of assistant principal at Maces Lane. Then I got the principal job at Maces Lane. And that's how I got to Dorchester County.
Oh.
And I worked for Maces Lane. I worked at Maces Lane for 3 years as assistant principal, and then 2 years as a principal. Then I went and opened up a private school in Talbot County called Polaris Village Academy. So I was the founding head of schools at Polaris. And then I worked also with the Wyatt Foundation at that time, which was an educational foundation out of Dorchester County. But the whole time, I never really wanted to leave. I wanted to leave the school system for a moment to get a different type of insight into education. And I always knew that I wanted to come back to Dorchester County because I always felt like it was just a connection there with me in Dorchester County. I always liked the kids. I always liked the community. And it just grew on me. This is the truth. Had I known about Dorchester County prior to, if Dr. Mitchell probably would have gave me some more information about Dorchester County, I might not never arrived, but I just came because she said it's a good opportunity for me to be assistant principal here. So I came with that in mind, but it has grown on me. I've never wanted to leave the area. Yeah. I like the community. I like the kids. I like the school system. And even though it is a challenge, I honestly and truly believe that Dorchester County is like a diamond in the rough. And I also think that the community will go how the school system goes. If the school system can change, then that and change and start winning, I think that can reverberate into the community and then can spark the community to change in the right direction. I firmly believe that, but I think it's going to take the school system to start to improve for everything else to improve.
Back to you, Jim.
I'm curious about what are some of the bright spots about the school system that get overlooked in so much discourse about the problem areas?
That's a good question as well. I think that we have first of all, I think we have wonderful teachers. I think you have a lot of good teachers in Dorchester County that don't get enough recognition for the things that they do on a consistent basis. I think that we have great principals and leadership here that gets overlooked. And last but not least, I think you have a lot of great students. You have students who have who remind me of me a lot, actually, who are challenging and have a lot of challenges behaviorally, and that's whether it's due to the home environment, mental health issues, but they remind me a lot of myself when I was coming through school. So I think that you have a plethora of great things as it relates to students, teachers, and administrators, but it's always overlooked for the 10% of things, that 10% being the behavior challenges. But I find out the public should be outraged by having 65 to 70% of your kids not proficient. Like, that should be talked about consistently. But I don't think that it seems like everything else is a point of emphasis. But we have a lot of good people in the Dorchester County. I think we have to improve our leadership as a whole to be better. But the people, the kids, I think that they're all great. And that's just not me talking. Like, I firmly believe that we have a lot of good people in the school system. I just think we just have to have a vision, which we already created our vision, which is going from 23rd to 15th. We have that goal in mind. We got to continue developing our plan to get there. And I think that with the right leadership, that we're going to get to 15th. I have no doubt about it.
You know, the other thing that Dorchester has to work through is the education blueprint.
Yes.
And this is, when you look at those goals, they are aspirational. They're also expensive. And I think that there has been a lot of anxiety in almost every county since it started to be implemented. We're now on year 3 or 4 at this point. How do you feel about the implementation for Dorchester, and what are the things that are going well, and maybe some of the things that still are a challenge for you all?
I think a lot of the aspects of the blueprint has been a challenge for us. I think that theoretically, it's a good idea what the blueprint has done, or what they want the blueprint to do. I think one of the areas of struggle for us is a full implementation. I give you examples. So for our finance department, every school has to have a blueprint budget, which is different from your regular budget. So that's 12 different budgets. You got to have different codes. Everything's a blueprint code, because all the money you receive from the state now is all coded blueprint. So that has to be coded. It requires more people than we have to be able to do all this heavy lifting in the finance department, and we just don't have that. Another thing, which I think is a good thing, but it's not fully funded, is increasing teacher salary. So teacher salary has to be $60,000 across the board. So that means that over the next couple of years, we have to give 4% raise with a 1-step increase. So that's a killer on your budget when you never was getting the money to fund that in the first place. So you have to do that. Then you have the dual enrollment with Chesapeake College. That costs money for us to be paying different. So paying students tuitions or for their course selections or classes that are taken there, that costs money. So you have all these things that have been mandated but not necessarily funded. Then you have blueprint coordinator you have to fund. They have given us some money for the blueprint coordinator position, but it's just a lot of things that that the state has mandated with the blueprint, but it's not necessarily, a lot of it's not paid for. Then we have our situation where you want to go ask the county for the money, but you want to ask the county for extra money when the county already gives 90, our budget's like 90 $20 million. So you have the county giving
Yeah.
roughly 24 million, and you had the state giving another several million. Then you got the rest coming from grants and things of that nature. So the county already has its own issues and going to ask them for more money, or the state telling the county that, oh, you need to pay for X, Y, and Z, but they don't know where that money is necessarily coming from. You can't continue to tax people money that's here in this county. So it's creating a lot of headaches for our overall budget and being able to plan. And then you had the ESSER cliff. I know you know about the COVID money that has had an impact because that's going away. So now you have that also going away. So
No.
it's just, it has created it's good in theory. I like some of the things it has done. It has done some good things, but then another thing that might come, might have another administration come in and they might just totally wipe their hands with it. So it's a lot of stuff that you got to navigate with the blueprint, but they still make us, they still mandate us to implement it. So we are abiding by the state as best as we can. We're not being defined by it, saying we're not doing this, and this, but you only can do what you have. And some of the stuff we can't fully implement because we don't have the resources to implement.
Yeah.
So speaking of budgets, one of the issues brought up by the school board members recently was spending by the school boards and administration. Apparently, sticking to budgets was a huge problem before you assumed your role as superintendent. What are you doing to ensure the staff doesn't ignore budgets and overspend?
So that's one of our, actually, we're bringing in an organization called Schoolworks, and they're doing a systems audit on our organization. So we're to make sure that we're putting in specific parameters to ensure that we're financially responsible. For example, our different departments are going to have meetings with our finance department and know what your budget is at the beginning of the year and know that you can't go over this amount of money per department. So everyone's going to be aware of their budget, the money they have in their budget. We also have the system called SunGuard that can prevent from the overspending. If something actually slips through the cracks, then our system SunGuard can prevent someone from being able to spend over that amount. We're also putting a limitation on the way we travel. We're putting limitations on the way we spend or use what we call P cards, making sure that everyone's following a P card process. And if you don't follow the P card process, for example, if someone has a spends on their P card and they don't provide a receipt, by the policy, you're supposed to pay for that item. So we're making sure that we're following the systems and processes that we have, but we're also going to create new ones that we didn't have to make sure that we're abiding by all the rules and regulations as it relates to spending. Then we're also not going to just be spending recklessly. I don't want to say recklessly because sometimes let's say you're not putting great thought into everything you spend. So if you really don't need these books, then we're not going to make sure we're not going to purchase these books. We're going to look if we have resources, because 9 times out of 10, we'll have some resources, other places that we can use instead of buying new books. So we're just going to make sure that we're making all wise decisions as it relates to spending so we don't get ourselves back. Not saying that is the reason why we're in a financial situation, but it definitely didn't help outside of the blueprint. It definitely didn't help from not being cognizant and having a financial mindset, a financial intelligence that we're going to make sure we're looking at every dime that we spend and we're just not spending recklessly.
I have another question just in terms of student life. Dr. Thompson, what's your take on mobile phones in the classroom? You must be reading my mind. I just was literally talking to my executives. We were just literally talking over the last 2 weeks about cell phones in the classroom. We definitely are against them. I know traditionally we have left that into the teacher's hands, and that's like a lot for them to try to mandate themselves. So we're definitely looking at different ways. I don't want to go on record to say what we're doing, but we're definitely looking at different ways to ensure that we can minimize, or not, let's not even say minimize, that we can eliminate the cell phones inside of the classroom. We're definitely tossing around ideas of what we can do to do that, but I definitely believe that
And there's been research. There's a lot of school districts. I was just reading an article of New York City. They're doing it. You have Virginia as a state just cut it out, period. So you have a lot of people, a lot of other states that have seen the impact of cell phone usage in the classrooms and in the building. So we're definitely, when I say definitely, we're definitely looking at ways to definitely eliminate cell phone usage in the school settings.
Yeah.
Nothing in concrete, but I'm sure my board will be in favor of looking at things in that way as well.
I'll give you a challenging one. You've said that you want to see Dorchester improve from being the number 23 school district in the state. What are some of the best avenues to do that right now?
One of the best avenues is, as we all know, the two most important people in students' learning is the teacher and the principal. So in order for us to move from 23rd to 15th, we have to ensure that our leadership at the school level is instructional leaders, as I said before at the CAN meeting, and making sure that when you're an instructional leader, you're putting instruction at the very foremost of what you're doing. And if we're trying to get our principals to be more instructional leaders, we got to provide them professional training on how to be an instructional leader, so we can move them from being an instructional lead from managers of the building to administration who is valuing and putting instruction at the forefront. And in doing so, that trickles down to the teacher and making sure that, so for example, we want our principals to be able to go into the side of the classroom and say, if we're focusing on questioning strategies, what questions you're asking kids and what questions students are asking each other. So we want our principals to be able to go in and provide valuable, to evaluate evaluate the teachers through observation, and then provide that feedback of how to get better when they go in to observe them. And we have to do that on a consistent basis, and that builds up and keeps building up. Like basically, if you're trying to start out running, you don't just start out running a sprint, you work your way up to that. So education and being able to be an instructional leader has that same philosophy. So they're going to go in the classroom and keep providing that feedback. And also you're providing a professional development to the teacher. This year for our principals, we have a schedule of professional development twice a month, to where we have this creative leadership solution who's going to be coming in, providing professional feedback, training for our principals on how to be good instructional leaders. And then they're doing that, and we'll go into the building doing walkthroughs with the administrative staff from the central office as well as the principal. So the central office has to be involved in this process and ensuring that our principals are being instructional leaders, and that's through accountability and making sure that they're doing exactly what we need them to do to become better instructional leaders. And that, to me, that trickles down to the teachers as well. And that's one of the ways that we can improve our instructional practices in the school setting. But that's not going to be the only thing that get us at 23 to 15. We have a lot of other avenues systematically at the central office that we have to improve upon. We have to improve on our customer service as a whole to ensure that we're providing good customer service to the parents, to outside vendors, to people who provide other social emotional service to our students. So instruction is at the forefront, but there are other tentacles that reach out that will also help us get from 23rd to 15th, because the Maryland Report Card has other areas that are measured, like attendance or chronic absenteeism, 10 or more absences. So we have other areas that we'll work on, but the main focus is going to get us to move is improving our instructional practices. And last time I used Tier 1 instruction, which that's a education term. And if you're not in education, you don't know what Tier 1 instruction means. So I didn't get a chance to actually explain that explicitly. So Tier 1 instruction is what every student should get when they come into a classroom. They should get classroom management, lesson plan, small group instruction, etc. That's what every student should get. Then if they're not getting that and able to grasp that information that they're getting at the Tier 1 level, then you move them up a continuum of services. And that's where they move to Tier 2. And that might mean they'll go outside of the classroom for a more structured, more intimate learning session. Then Tier 3, then Tier 4. So it gets more restrictive as you go up that line of services. And I also failed to mention as it relates to the tier 1 instruction, we have to provide more opportunities for interventions during the school day. So all of our elementary schools are going to be providing 2 blocks of interventions, one in math and one in ELA, every day to our students across the board at every elementary school that we have. So last year we didn't have that. This year I wanted to make sure that everyone was doing that at every level. So it doesn't make sense if you say, oh, you're sitting at 8% proficiency as it relates to math, but you're not doing the interventions for the students during the day as it relates to the math.
Yeah.
Because they have to get their grade level content, but they also need their instructional level, because their grade level could be 3rd grade, but their instructional level may be 2nd or 1st grade. So they have to get that intervention at the 2nd grade level so it can scaffold to their 3rd grade level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So it's a culmination of a variety of things that we have to try to end up getting from 23rd to 15th. And all the schools, we did a deep data dive with all the schools, know our students at every level of their school, and the testing grades from 3 to 5th know where their students are. And so, for example, you might have 50 students that are on a cusp. We call them bubble students. So we got to be able to take those students that are 50. Them 50 students we call the bubble students. We got to be able to take them and move them from being, we call bubble, to right on the cusp of becoming proficient. So you'll get your biggest bang for your buck if you can take and move those students from becoming from almost proficient to proficiency.
Yeah.
So them are some of the things that we're looking at. We're looking at our data real deep to make sure that we have all the students that we need to move. And then lower students, you have some lower students who are below expectations, and you're grouping those students together. You're doing everything you can do to intervene and get them to move to the next level. Yeah. And here's something that the reason why we had to improve our tier 1 instruction. So I said before, if you look at our numbers, we're sitting roughly between 60 to 70% of our students not proficient. So that already means that those students should be in tier 2 or tier 3. Does that make sense? Because they're not proficient. So if you're not, you can't run a school system with having all your kids in tier 2 or tier 3. So you have to improve the tier 1 instruction so you don't have a lot of your students already in tier 2 and tier 3. So them are some of the things we're trying to do. Just to wrap that question up, we're trying to professionally train our teachers and our staff. We're trying to create more times for students to intervene, and we're trying to create a continuous cycle of improvement by doing observation, evaluation, and feedback, and then going to check on how the teachers are improving in that feedback. But once again, it all starts with making sure that your principals are instructional leaders, and that is trickling down to the administration, to the assistant principals, as well as the teachers in the classroom.
Hey, listen, our time has come to an end. Jim, do you have any last questions?
Oh, nothing that won't keep till we meet again.
Dr. Thompson, we'd like to do this quarterly, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, that's fine.
Well, thank you for your time today, and we'll see you in a couple of months.
Okay.